everyone, welcome back to the channel. In the video today we're going to be taking a look at a mesh deformation script. This script will be able to be applied to any rigid body with a mesh collider. The script will detect a collision and then dynamically alter the mesh according to both the point of collision and how severe the collision was. In addition to changing the mesh itself, it will also be able to dynamically change the collisions. So let's get started. Okay, so here's our basic scene setup in Unity. We have a car, which drives forward infinitely, and then we have a wall. Now when I open up the wall in Blender, you'll notice I've subdivided the wall into several sections. Now we do this because when there's a point of collision, we need to have some vertices to grab onto. If it was just a cube like this, it wouldn't have any geometry to hold onto to deform the mesh besides the corners. But remember not to make your mesh too complex, especially the colliders. If possible, when you're using a mesh collider on a rigid body, try to use a lower level of detail on the mesh so that our deform script can work in runtime. Now back in Unity, there are a couple of things that we need to take care of. Now if you're using a rigid body with mesh colliders, you have to set convex to true. I'm not sure why Unity has it set up this way, but it pretty much makes a lower level of detail collision so that it can operate in runtime. You'll have to use this for all rigid bodies in your scene. Now the second thing that we'll need to take care of is setting read-write enabled in our models. If you want to dynamically alter a mesh in runtime, you have to set read-write enabled to true. So we're going to go ahead and do this for both our wall and our car again. Now since we don't want the wall to move during runtime, we can set isKinematic to true. This will make it so that the wall can't move during runtime. Now let's get started on the deformation script. I've now created the script and I added it onto my wall. Now this script is rather complicated, so I'm going to do a basic overview of the script rather than writing it all out. So we have 5 main public variables. We have the deform radius, which is how far from the point of collision we can alter the mesh. Then we have maximum deform. I'll go further into this one later, but in short it's the maximum amount of deformation that can happen to a single vertex. Damage falloff is a float between 0 and 1 that determines how far the damage falloff is between the point of collision and the maximum radius. So if it was 0, all vertexes in the deform radius would be altered equally. If damage falloff was 1, then there would be a linear drop-off between the point of collision and a given vertex on the edge of the collision. This would make the collision a lot smoother. Damage multiplier is the amount of damage applied per collision. Minimum damage is the minimum amount of damage that can be applied to the mesh while still getting a deformation result. Finally, we have our list of collision sounds. Now this is where things start to get complicated. We call onCollisionEnter when the object has been collided with another object. First we check if collision power is great enough to cause damage to the mesh. If so, we play a collision sound if any. Now we look through every point of collision in the mesh. We also have to check for every vertex in the mesh. I know this is a very slow method of doing it, but it's the most thorough. Now here we have vertex position, which is the position of our given vertex. Now here we initialize point position. This is just a point of collision in world space. Now for any given vertex, we also need to get the distance from the collision. This is just vector3 distance from the given vertex position and the point position. Distance from original is the vector3 distance between a starting vertex and the vertex position. We use this to make sure that the vertex isn't too far when it gets deformed. Now we finally check if our vertex is within the collision radius and within the maximum deform. Now we do some simple math to calculate the x, y, and z coordinates for the deform. We then transform this into a vector3 and then apply it to the mesh vertex. Again, we loop through every vertex and apply this. Now finally we call update mesh vertices. This just changes the filter and the collisions mesh using our updated vertices. For this wall in particular, I'm going to change the default values. I'm going to set the deform radius to 3 meters, maximum deform to 1. Damage falloff is going to be kept at 1 because I want a smooth dent in the wall. Damage multiplier is going to be 0.5.
That's a lot of damage!
And finally, minimum damage is going to be 10,000. I'm setting the minimum damage so high because our car has a mass of 3,500 kilograms. Now here you also set any collision sounds if you have any. Now let's go test it out. As you can see, when the car hit the wall, there was a major deformation in the geometry of the wall. Now let's see how this would work without any damage fall off. Without any damage fall off, it's a much more sharp collision, and you can see the triangles in the mesh. When you compare it to with damage fall off, you can barely even see the triangles on the mesh. Now let's apply our script to the car as well. Now here I have a bunch of spears. Oh my god, not spears. It's so satisfying to watch demolition. Now let's try crashing our car into the wall with the new deformation script on both objects. Looks like the car has seen some better days. Well, that'll do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed or at least learned something, and I'll see you guys again in the next video.